Developing right now on Morning News Now, a rare face-to-face in Russia, fueling fears in the West. Overnight, Russian President Vladimir Putin hosting North Korean leader Kim Jong-un for a high-stakes summit with everything from arms sales to satellite technology on the agenda. More on the meeting that's drawing warnings from Washington and what a potential partnership could mean for the world. Also this morning, drenched, millions of people waking up to more wet weather from a slow-moving storm stretching across the Northeast. And Hurricane Lee as it takes aim at the Caribbean. We're tracking the storm's path and what to expect here in the U.S. Plus, season ender. It's official. Star NFL quarterback Aaron Rodgers is out for the season after an MRI confirms he tore his Achilles just minutes into his Jets debut. Plus, new concerns about the risks of brain injury for female athletes. What doctors want you to know. And on the pink carpet, it's one of TV's wildest award shows. This morning, we're bringing you highlights from this year's MTV Video Music Awards, including the tribute as we celebrate 50 years of hip-hop. Let's talk about a throwback, the big reunion involving a certain 2000s boy band that has millennials reliving their childhoods this morning.
Not just millennials, too. Hi.
Yeah,
Hi. They're back.
Oh, my gosh. Them coming out, obviously, Taylor Swift freaking out over them. I loved that moment. She cleaned house. It was just, I actually thought it was a great show. It felt like a concert. There were so many performances.
That's the best thing about the music awards shows. We'll more about it in a little bit. Good morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Good to have you with us. We begin our show this morning with that high-stakes summit between North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un and Russian President Vladimir Putin.
Both men met at the Vostochny Cosmodrome, a Russian space center. It is a gathering that could have major implications for the war in Ukraine and for North Korea's satellite program. The leaders toured the Russian space center before sitting down for talks. Kim offered his full support to Russia, while Putin said all issues would be on the table. NBC News foreign correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer joins us now from the South Korean capital, Seoul. So, Janice, this was a summit between two nations that weren't exactly close before. What was that initial meeting like between Kim and Putin, and what did both leaders say in their opening remarks?
Well, both Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un are isolated internationally. Their countries are both considered rogue states, and while they haven't been traditionally diplomatically close, they do find themselves strategically aligned. And so today they met at the Cosmodrome in the Far East region. There were red carpets and honor guards, and presumably this looming possibility of a weapons deal. They said that all issues were on the table. Kim said that he told his host that Moscow had his full backing in what he described as a sacred fight with the West. And Putin told Kim that he was very happy to meet him, and he welcomed him to this new facility.
So, Janice, the location of the meeting was clearly significant at that Russian space center. What more can you tell us about Putin offering to help Kim with North Korea's own satellite program, and then the munitions deal for Russia? Is that happening?
Well, Russia needs suppliers to replenish its military supplies for the war in Ukraine. And North Korea has inventory. They have a sizable defense industry. They have full-scale production capabilities. And now it seems they have a buyer. In return, North Korea would get access to Russian know-how, a sort of satellite and nuclear submarine technology that Kim Jong-un has been looking for. Twice in the past several months, including just a couple of weeks ago, North Korea has attempted to launch a satellite, and both attempts have failed. So Kim Jong-un has made this a top priority for his country.
And Janice, we understand North Korea has launched 2 short-range ballistic missiles, the first time ever that's happened while Kim is outside of the country. What's the significance of that?
Well, Kim Jong-un actually hasn't traveled that much out of the country after being in power for some 12 years now. And this was the first since the pandemic, so it has been nearly 4 years. It's seen as a sign that there are better systems in place for levels of delegation within North Korea, and also that the weapons systems and weapons programs are now more refined. And also, Joe, it's just part of the showcase to have so much attention being paid to this particular meeting, and for the missiles to be launched as Kim Jong-un is having lunch with Vladimir Putin, and they're eating beef and drinking Russian wine. It sends a signal that this is a man who's still in control and that he has the capabilities to launch rockets while not even in the country.
Janice Mackey-Freyer reporting from Seoul, South Korea. Janice, thank you.
Well, turning now to those catastrophic floods in Libya, which have left an unprecedented trail of death and destruction. This morning, a harrowing update from a local minister who says more than 5,000 people have died so far. He says that number could double, with thousands more still missing after being swept away by the waters. A powerful storm caused the floods, which later burst 2 dams and decimated the coastal city of Derna. The UN says tens of thousands of people are now displaced, while foreign countries are scrambling emergency response teams and aid shipments.
To weather closer to home now, Hurricane Lee is making its way across the Atlantic Ocean and getting closer to the U.S. And you can see just how massive this system is here. Lee has remained a major hurricane overnight and is expected to begin weakening, but then grow in size and speed as the day goes on.
Yeah, it's still unclear whether the storm will make landfall in the U.S. No matter what, though, experts warned the effects of Hurricane Lee will be felt along the East Coast through the week. New England is already preparing for tropical storm-force winds, coastal flooding, and life-threatening riptides. So let's bring in Angie Lassman for the latest on Lee's track and what you need to know to stay safe. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, guys. I think it might be a little confusing to some folks for me to say that it's going to weaken, but it also is going to grow in size. It's going to speed up. So we've got all those details that kind of helps you navigate exactly what you need to do or maybe not do to prepare. Here's the latest details as far as Hurricane Lee is concerned this morning. Category 3, yes, still remaining a major hurricane with winds at 113 miles per hour and moving northwest at 6 miles per hour. It's going to continue to keep that northerly track here as we go through at least the extended period. But notice what happens as we get into tomorrow. By Friday morning, we're going to see this system just to the west of Bermuda. Folks there already have tropical storm warnings in effect, so they will start to see those impacts from tropical storm conditions here in the short term. Next 24 to 36 hours, we're talking about strong winds and potentially some rain for folks there. In the meantime, we already have issues with the high surf and the rip currents up and down the East Coast. That's not going to change, and that's going to stay with us through the extended period. What hasn't come into full view for us just yet is exactly where the center of that storm will come on shore. We still have places in New England that are close, or that are in that cone and or close to that cone, and we of course have parts of Atlantic Canada that we're going to watch for, Nova Scotia, etc. It will weaken. It goes from a category 1, 3 a.m. on Friday and continues to weaken as it enters those cold waters. As it's weakening, though, it's going to grow in size. We're going to see that wind field especially expand, and that could mean a couple different things for some strong winds for certain locations across parts of New England. When we're talking about rain, it looks like the heaviest of the rain is going to be closer to where that center is. Either way, we could see some flooding concerns across parts of Maine. 1 to 3 inches is possible, especially the farther east you go. And even along the coast, we'll see the conditions still with the coastal issues as well as potentially some storm surge. Now, when I'm talking about the storm growing, this is what I mean. Here's Thursday. Tropical storm force winds extend 400 miles in diameter. So just to give you a little perspective, hurricane force winds in Idalia were only 25 miles from the center. So this is a really impressive wind field, and it grows. It gets to 500 miles by the time we get into Saturday. That means that more people impacted by those stronger winds. I'd say that we'll likely see 40 to 60 mile per hour winds for folks along the coast in places like Cape Cod, Nantucket, and parts of Maine. We'll continue to see those conditions. So just something that you'll have to watch for, and the time is going to be Saturday into Sunday.
Indoor weekend.
Indoor weekend for sure.
Exactly. All right.
Wow.
For sure,
All right,
Thanks,
Angie
Angie.
Lassman, thanks so much. Well, now let's get to that new drama playing out on Capitol Hill. Speaker Kevin McCarthy announced that he was directing the House Oversight, Judiciary, and Ways and Means Committees to open an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. McCarthy called the inquiry a, quote, logical next step as the GOP-led House seeks bank records and other documents from both Biden as well as his son, Hunter.
House Republicans have uncovered serious and credible allegations into President Biden's conduct. Taken together, these allegations paint a picture of a culture of corruption.
House Republicans have alleged that the president has profited off Hunter's foreign business dealings and lied about it, but have provided no direct evidence to prove those claims. The White House has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing. For more on this, we are joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ali Vitale. Ali, always wonderful to have you with us. So the House GOP has already been conducting investigations into the president and his son Hunter. So I want you to pack a lot here for us. This is kind of a 3-in-1 question as a warning. What exactly is an impeachment inquiry, what it isn't, but then also what it takes for this inquiry to end in an actual impeachment?
All right, you're going to test my memory for the order of questions this early in the morning, Savannah. But first, an impeachment inquiry basically allows these lawmakers to just go ever so slightly further in their investigatory powers than they've already been able to go. Look, Republicans have the power of the gavel. With the power of the gavel comes the power of subpoenas. They've already been doing the investigating into Hunter Biden and these other threads of the investigation at oversight, judiciary, and ways and means. So these already are things that are happening. This allows them to go a little bit further in terms of trying to get bank records. That's going to be one of the first things that we end up seeing. What it isn't is an actual all-out impeachment of President Biden. But what it will likely become is that, because right now, what this does for McCarthy is say that he's doing what he calls the next logical step. This is something that he's been under pressure to do. But by doing this, if he doesn't move forward with an impeachment inquiry, he's effectively acquitting Biden. But if he does move forward with it, then he's moving forward with what many in his conference have been pressuring him to do in the first place, which is an actual impeachment. So this is the next step, but this doesn't bring him all the way there. And in my conversations with some Republicans yesterday, this move was supposed to placate people like Matt Gaetz and Ralph Norman, some House Freedom Caucus members. Instead, they're saying this might be a little bit too little, too late, or in Matt Gaetz's word, a baby step. They're going to want to see more.
So, Ali, as you mentioned, probably one of the most tangible things here is the fact that the House has this more legal power to look into the Biden family by taking this step. Explain what it is that Republicans think that they might find with that power now and what the reality has been so far of what they've been able to track down.
Yeah, look, the allegations that they're making here against the president is that he illegally profited off of his office when he was vice president of the United States. Some of these claims have already been debunked. For example, the ways in which then Vice President Biden held up aid to Ukraine to get rid of a corrupt prosecutor at the time. That's something that has since been debunked. But what many on the judiciary and oversight committees have been trying to figure out is if there is any link between Hunter Biden's dealings with companies like Burisma and the vice president at the time. They've not been able to come up with that evidence, but they think by taking this next step, being able to dig further into bank records, possibly being able to subpoena people higher up the food chain in the Hunter Biden investigation, they think that could give them the evidence that they need. Right now, though, I think it's important to say they don't have that, and that's probably why they don't have the votes. And so what McCarthy is doing here right now, when we say he doesn't have the votes, is he doesn't have the votes to move forward within his conference on an actual impeachment of the president. This is meant to convince people within his conference that he's A, moving forward in that direction, but B, not moving forward in a way that it jeopardizes his moderate members. So it's a real balancing act, again, of Republicans.
Absolutely. And Ali, let's talk about the other side before I let you go. What are Democrats saying? What's the White House saying?
Yeah. Nothing surprising here. We'll let them speak for themselves. The top Democrats in the Senate and the House sounding like this.
I think it's absurd. The American people want us to do things for them. And here you have a group of Republicans, not all, but too many, who are off the deep end.
Extreme MAGA Republicans have launched an illegitimate impeachment inquiry that is a kangaroo court, fishing expedition, and conspiracy theater rolled into one.
And look, I do think it's important to point out here, Savannah, it's not shocking to hear Democrats come to the defense of the White House and President Biden, but there are even some Republicans who we've heard from both on the House side who are reluctant about this probe going forward, but especially on the Senate side, some Republican senators saying that it feels like the bar for impeachment is just getting lower and lower, as this used to be something that was rare, but now it feels like every Congress we're doing at least one impeachment proceeding.
All right, Ali Vitale, thank you so much.
There are new developments this morning in the search for that escaped prisoner in Pennsylvania. Police say they've recovered a backpack that they think belongs to the convicted murderer as they close in on an area where they believe he is hiding. NBC News correspondent George Solis has the latest.
Good morning. Things as tense as ever in this manhunt for Danilo Cavalcante. Overnight, some pretty interesting developments as law enforcement sources telling our affiliate WCAU that they may have recovered a backpack that the fugitive has been using in his run from the law. The more significant updates, though, come from Monday night when authorities say Cavalcante made his way into the garage of a homeowner here in this 8 to 10 square mile perimeter that they've set up and stole a .22 rifle. It's reported that the homeowner caught him in the act and had a pistol on him and fired shots in Cavalcante's direction. Authorities don't believe he was hurt. They also believe Cavalcante may now be shirtless as they recovered that green or yellow hooded sweatshirt that he was last seen wearing. They also think he may have a pair of work boots now that he stole from a nearby porch, as they found his prison shoes in these wooded areas with some muddy footprints there as well. They know and believe he is growing more desperate. They know that he stole that work van from that dairy farm a few days ago where he ditched it here. They think he might try and steal another vehicle to get out of this area. Authorities know that he is a big threat right now with that rifle, so they are sort of changing their tactics as they approach these woods. But we know there are more than 500 law enforcement officers scouring these woods day and night with drones, dogs, helicopters, anything to try and flush him out. Meanwhile, schools in this area still remain on lockdown. A lot of people feel the situation grows more dire by the day. Many skeptical if he'll ever be caught, but authorities remain confident they'll catch their man. Joe and Savannah.
All right, George, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News analyst and retired ATF special agent in charge, Jim Kavanaugh. Jim, thanks as always for being here. So let's dig into this. The suspect has been able to evade police so far. It looks, though, like police believe, at least, especially with that update we got and what George just explained, that they're trying to box him in and that this may actually be where he is. They say they found this backpack they believe belonged to him. How effective do you think this new perimeter will be in finding him, especially since we know he's slipped through at least one already?
Well, it's going to be tough because when you put a perimeter around, a rural area, even a suburban area, there's so much places to hide in the woods. This guy's very adept. It's his third time as being a fugitive in a rural area. He's proved he can get away. He's very cagey. He's armed. So the game between them both is, can they get him in that perimeter? Can somebody spot him, a citizen or an officer, and then just, ramp up where you can get on him really fast? That's how you would catch him. His game is he needs to slip that perimeter on foot, because if he gets to somebody in a vehicle or gets in a vehicle, the roadblocks will catch him in the perimeter. So likely he's smart enough to know this. He's going to try to slip that perimeter on foot in the night. And then he wants to get a car, carjack someone, shoot someone, get their keys, get the car, and, get a few hours away before that crime is discovered. And that's what he no doubt is trying to do, and head south for the border.
So yesterday, when we got all these updates in this press conference, police were questioned. They took a lot of questions, but there was some focus on the challenges they faced with capturing the suspect. I want to play a little bit of what Lieutenant Colonel George Bibbins had to say and talk on the other side.
Our law enforcement people have done an amazing job tracking him and locating him, that proverbial needle in the haystack, and they've located that needle repeatedly. Our people have done an amazing job. I'm very proud of the work that they have done and continue to do. Nothing has gone wrong. Our agencies are all working very well together, and I believe we will be successful in the long run.
So what struck me yesterday as Joe and I were watching this live is, this is a convicted killer who's been on the run now since August 31st. I mean, what are your thoughts on that comment there? Has nothing gone wrong?
Well, I've been in this commander's shoes before. I mean, I've chased cop killers with, cordons of 400 troopers and agents around similar terrain. And I remember one who slipped through our cordon and carjacked someone and got away. Because, look, this guy can slip out of a prison with walls and guard towers and razor wire. And he did it the same way that a guy did it back in May. I mean, that's the heavy criticism in this case, I think, belongs there. This guy escaped the same way an inmate escaped in May from the same prison. Mm-hmm. Officers can only be so many places at so many, moments, and they're challenged by physics and geography and terrain. And this guy's very cagey. So they need a break, but they're leveraging the public on their side. Mm-hmm. They're doing a good job on communication because they need all the eyes of the citizens to say, I just saw the guy run through my yard. My camera picked him up. He was behind my house. And then they can swarm that area and maybe flush him out. That's what they've got to do now.
All right, Jim Kavanaugh, as always, we appreciate your expertise. Thank you so much.
5 former Memphis police officers are now facing federal charges. They're accused of civil rights violations in the beating death of Tyree Nichols. Yesterday, the Justice Department announced the 4-count indictment against the former officers. They were already facing state charges of second-degree murder and other alleged offenses. They've all pleaded not guilty to those charges. Nichols was violently beaten during a January traffic stop near his home. The 29-year-old died 3 days later. Announcing the indictments, Kristen Clark, who leads the DOJ's Civil Rights Division, said no one is above the law.
When some officers violate the Constitution, when they use excessive force, when they ignore serious injuries inflicted on people they arrest, their actions erode the public's trust.
NBC News Justice and Intelligence correspondent Ken Delaney joins us now. So, Ken, first of all, just walk us through what's included in this federal indictment.
Good morning, Joe. This case was notable because videos of this horrific beating were released to the public. And Attorney General Merrick Garland said yesterday that the country watched in horror as Tyree Nichols was kicked, punched, tased, and pepper sprayed. And he said, we all heard Mr. Nichols cry out for his mother and say, I'm just trying to go home. So these 5 officers have been fired. They're in custody. They've been charged with murder in state court. Yesterday, the federal government, the Justice Department, indicted them on a Civil War era statute, deprivation of civil rights under color of law, and related charges, a 4-count indictment that accuses them of violating Mr. Nichols' civil rights by beating him to death and also by failing to render medical aid, and it accuses them of conspiring to obstruct justice and tamper with witnesses. Now, the state charges against these officers carry a penalty of 25 years in prison. These federal charges carry a penalty of up to life in prison. So both the state and the federal governments have 2 cracks now at these officers who have pleaded not guilty in state court, Joe.
So, Ken, any reaction from the attorneys of the former officers, anything from the police department?
The attorneys have said that they expected this development and that they are prepared to defend themselves. The police department we haven't heard from. They are under investigation separately by the Justice Department in what's known as a pattern and practice civil rights investigation to see if there are issues beyond these 5 officers with the way Memphis is policing. And that is a process that will go on for a long time. And it's happening in many, many major American cities, Joe.
So let's talk about what comes next after this federal indictment. What's next in the process?
Well, look, both the federal and the state cases will go through, the usual procedures in court. For example, in the state case, the police officers are trying to separate their trials so they aren't tried separately. The federal case will take a year or more to go to trial. It'll be interesting to see which one goes to trial first, most likely the state case. But again, what's important for prosecutors is if something goes wrong in either of these cases, then they have the other one to make sure that they bring justice to Tyree Nichols' family.
All right. Ken Delaney. And Ken, thank you so much.
There's much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, off the field for good. Heartbreak in New York and across the sports world for Star Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers. The MRI results that could signal the end of Rodgers' Hall of Fame career.
Up first, an NBC News exclusive, what Iran's president is telling our own Lester Holt about the high-stakes multi-billion-dollar prisoner swap that could soon bring 5 Americans back home. We'll be right back. Welcome back. The pieces are nearly in place for a prisoner swap between the U.S. and Iran. Tehran will receive $6 billion in previously frozen funds as part of the deal.
In an exclusive interview with NBC's Lester Holt through a government translator, Iran's president says his country will spend the funds wherever it's needed. Here's that wide-ranging interview.
We arrived in Tehran at a critical moment, as consequential as it is controversial. The White House moving quickly to frame the details of a prisoner swap that would unlock $6 billion of frozen Iranian funds that the U.S. says would be for Iran's humanitarian use only. After Iran's President Ebrahim Raisi telling me in an exclusive interview that Iran will do whatever it wants with the money.
No, that's not true. The system is set up such that this money, these funds, can only be parceled out for humanitarian purposes.
The 5 Americans at the center of the deal, held for years, are expected to be freed at any time. Recently transferred from a prison cell where they had been held on espionage charges. The U.S. says they were unjustly detained. Now they wait to be exchanged for 5 Iranians held in the U.S. on alleged sanctions violations. For Iran, the deal will free up billions that had been blocked by U.S. sanctions. Walking the busy streets of this capital, it doesn't immediately strike you how isolated this country is. But in fact, Iran is the second most sanctioned country in the world. Russia only surpassed it after its invasion of Ukraine. Speaking to President Raisi through a government-provided translator, I asked about the well-being of the soon-to-be freed Americans. Are they healthy? Are they well?
They are very healthy, and according to our latest information, they are in full health.
I want to ask you about the deal. $6 billion that Iran has, its own money, for humanitarian purposes. There are many in the United States, members of Congress, who have raised concerns that this is a ransom, that this is appeasement of Iran, that it will only encourage Iran to take Americans in other circumstances and falsely accuse them. What's your response to that?
Just from the beginning, we have been intending to release the Iranian frozen assets, which have been unjustly frozen by the United States, to freedom. We believe that this American action was very unjust just from the beginning. It has imposed further pressure on the Iranian people.
You believe this money was wrongfully taken from Iran, but what is your expectation of its use? We're told that it's for humanitarian purposes, food and medicine. Do you believe you have the right to use that money in any way that you see fit?
This money belongs to the Islamic Republic of Iran, and naturally, we will decide, the Islamic Republic of Iran will decide to spend it wherever we need it.
So if I hear you clearly, that it will be used for more than humanitarian purposes in your view?
Humanitarian means whatever the Iranian people needs. So this money will be budgeted for those needs. And the needs of the Iranian people will be decided and determined by the Iranian government.
Meantime, Iran has faced internal troubles, namely a violent crackdown on women's rights protesters who are demanding an end to a law that requires women here to wear head coverings. The protest movement led by women here. We saw many openly defying the law. Are you at all afraid to walk down the streets without a scarf?
No, I don't have afraid because I'm really tired about this.
I asked the president about that deadly government crackdown on those protesters. We are sitting here, Mr. President, at nearly the one-year anniversary of the death of Mahsa Amini, a young woman who was arrested by the morality police for allegedly improperly wearing her head covering. The response, the government response to the protesters was swift, and it was brutal in the eyes of many. Humanitarian groups say at least 500 people were killed, perhaps many young people. Thousands, tens of thousands were arrested, that there were people executed or put on death row, journalists who were rounded up. What message did that send to the rest of the world, how Iran handled those protests?
It was an incident. The same incidents happen every day in the U.S. and in the European cities. The Islamic Republic of Iran responded swiftly and followed the issue. But I would like to mention the fact that the Western countries and some European countries and the U.S. were making use of this incident as a project against the Islamic Republic of Iran. It was a hybrid war and a cognitive war. It was a political war. It was an economic war, a media war, and a psychological war against the Islamic Republic of Iran.
If I understand what you're saying, you're blaming what happened on the streets after Mahsa Amini's death on Western influences and American efforts to undermine this country. But those were Iranian security forces in the street firing pellets at unarmed people or live weapons at crowds that included young people. Do you not see anything in the last year in which you have to take responsibility for?
Those who provoked the people and made use of this opportunity, that was the US and European countries. Those who were trying to blaze banks or to open fire on the people or to kill people, certainly our security force on the street cannot allow terror to happen. We cannot allow anyone to destroy the public places. We cannot endanger the safety of our people.
If on Saturday, the anniversary of Mahsa Amini's death, if there are protests to commemorate that date, would the security forces crack down in the same way?
So do you know that are there going to be any protests in the country?
I don't know. There are reports the government has taken actions to quiet activists ahead of that date. Can you comment on that?
You should be assured that the Islamic Republic of Iran has always been ready to listen to words of protesters on any issue. We are all ears. And those who intend to abuse Madam Amini's name under this pretext to be an agent of foreigners to create this instability in the country, we know what will happen to them, and they know that endangering the security of people and security of society will create a big cost.
Our thanks to Lester Holt for that report and that interview from Iran.
Coming up, one more shot this morning. A new COVID booster is on its way to pharmacies all across the country. What you need to know as the number of COVID cases goes up.
Plus, at risk, the new concerns about the safety of women's sports after a female athlete was diagnosed with CTE, that brain condition. This is Morning News Now. Welcome back. CDC Director Mandy Cohen gave the final stamp of approval for the latest COVID booster shot yesterday, making the vaccine available as early as tomorrow in some areas. The booster shot is being broadly recommended for anyone over the age of 6 months. The CDC is urging everyone to get this latest vaccine dose as cases continue to rise across the country. But it is unclear if people will follow that advice. Actually, just 17% of those who were eligible for the last booster shot actually got that dose.
It was heartbreaking news for New York Jets fans. An MRI confirmed their worst football fears. Star quarterback Aaron Rodgers will be out for the season after tearing his Achilles tendon just 4 plays into his Jets career. The Jets signed Rodgers in a blockbuster deal during the offseason after he spent 18 seasons in Green Bay. That leaves Zach Wilson as the only healthy quarterback currently on the Jets' 53-man roster. It's not just professional athletes like Aaron Rodgers who need to be mindful of the risks that come with playing sports. Injuries happen at all levels of play, and concussions are one of the most common injuries for men and women.
And earlier this year, the first female athlete was diagnosed with what's called CTE, a brain disorder likely caused by repeated head injuries. And experts say the diagnoses in women are only expected to climb in the coming years. Leslie Slachter joins us now. She's a clinical director and chief physician assistant in the Department of Neurosurgery at Mount Sinai Health System. Thank you so much for being here. I know you're also a member of the New York State Society of PAs, and we are lucky to have you to talk about this with us. What should we know about CTE? How much have we learned, and what do you think about these female diagnoses?
Right. So thank you for having me. So CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, is a neurodegenerative disease that can actually only be diagnosed on autopsy, post-mortem. And it typically happens in athletes who played contact sports. What we heard about this year, the first diagnosis in a woman, Heather Anderson, was a 28-year-old Australian rules football player. And not only did she play contact sports for most of her life, she was actually also in the military, and she was involved in martial arts. Towards the end of her life, which she took by suicide, she exhibited symptoms of what we call in medicine traumatic encephalopathy syndrome, which are the clinical manifestation of CTE. So you can't be diagnosed with CTE until you've passed, but those motor neurological changes you can see during life.
Why is it we just saw the first diagnoses of a female athlete this year? I mean, is it possible other female athletes have CTE or have had CTE and we just didn't diagnose it right away?
Oh, I'm sure it's likely. So historically, it was diagnosed in boxers and then football players. And remember, brains have to be donated. It has to be found on autopsy, and you have to look for it, right? So in the last couple decades, women are getting stronger. They're playing harder. They're hitting harder than they ever have before. So this is going to be the first of many.
So we have this up on our screen right now. Walk us through some symptoms of a concussion and what you think, if yourself, your teammate, a loved one might have some of these symptoms, what should you be doing?
Right. So it's the beginning of the school year. Football season is starting. As we saw, I mean, the obvious thing that you saw with Aaron Rodgers was the Achilles. Concussion is invisible. So if an athlete or your loved one is playing and they look kind of dazed or confused after a hit, it doesn't have to be a head hit. It can be a body hit, and you don't need to lose consciousness. The symptoms are headache, nausea, visual disturbance, disorientation. You kind of look a little shaken.
What are the precautions that female athletes should be taking to avoid concussions? And are there some sports that are more susceptible than others to this?
Sure. Sports that are contact sports, right? So you're more likely to suffer a concussion in something like soccer or football than you are something like volleyball. So the precautions are learn how to play the sport properly. You don't want to throw your child into a sport with a coach that's never coached before. They should learn how to accept a tackle, give a tackle, wear the proper equipment, make sure it's fitting properly. Once concussions actually happen, you want to make sure that you don't go back to play too soon. You want to start moving and get exercise so that you can recover from the concussion quicker, but not to return too quick to suffer a secondary concussion.
How difficult is this, that this is not something that can be named and done anything about while someone is alive, that you can't even call it what it is until after they've passed?
Right. So the symptoms as they get older are typical of what you might see in something like Parkinson's or dementia, neurodegenerative diseases. And since there's so much overlap with other diagnoses, it can be difficult. So raising awareness of the long-term effects of concussion and the possibility of a CTE diagnosis is important, and protecting the brain that's already there. So if there's any concerns that you might have CTE or traumatic encephalopathy syndrome, protect your brain. Don't smoke, don't drink, eat healthy, exercise. You want to protect what you have.
Has there been sort of a reverse stigma here? Like, this is not something that happens to women. It only happens to men, and we need to educate people that's not the case?
I think that's exactly correct. You know, if you're on Instagram or any social media, women are lifting hard. They're playing hard. They're aggressive. They're getting hit more. So it's equal. Women are actually likely to be more susceptible to concussion. So I think we're going to see a lot of this in the future, and it's our job as parents and coaches to protect them.
Yeah, as susceptible as any man could be. Leslie Schlachter, thank you so much for joining us. Great conversation, and important to remember, as you point out, headed back to school and all those sports starting for kids. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, a new iPhone, Apple Watch, and AirPods. Oh, my.
Up next, we'll show you Apple's latest and greatest new devices from yesterday's big unveiling, plus when you can get your hands on them. This is Morning News Now. We're back now with big news about Apple's new iPhone.
Yesterday, the tech giant unveiled the iPhone 15 and announced some major changes. Dalvin Brown, consumer tech reporter for the Wall Street Journal, joins us now. So obviously the headline was the iPhone 15. So what do we know about it? How much will it cost? When can we get our hands on it?
Yeah, so the iPhone 15, the big news with the iPhone 15 is that it has a new USB-C charger. So that's the biggest change that's hit an iPhone in a couple years now. It means that your iPhone, your MacBook, and whatever random gadget you bought on Black Friday will use the same cable, you know, if you get the iPhone 15 going forward. Pricing-wise, Apple kept the prices the same, except for the Pro Max, which is now $100 more. That's about $1,200 for the most premium version of the iPhone 15. What's also new is the Pro models have a button on the side. So we're all used to the mute button, the little mute toggle to, you know, put your phone on mute. That's now a customizable button you can use to, you know, do whatever you want. Basically launch whatever apps or features you want more quickly. You can customize that button.
And we think it's coming out. When is the phone going to be out?
You can pre-order them, I think this Friday, and then next week you should be able to buy them at
All right, there you go.
It's got a new button. Joe likes the button.
I
Joe
love
still
buttons.
has the iPhone with the button instead of this. You probably don't even remember that.
You're wearing a mask? It's awesome.
Tell me about the Apple Watch and AirPods. What's new there?
Yeah, so the Apple Watch, the big feature coming to Apple Watches is gesture control. So essentially you have your Apple Watch on. If you're too tired to tap it with your finger, you can now just like double tap your fingers and control the watch. You can use that to stop and start your music, to stop a timer. So that's like the big change coming to Apple Watch. There's also like brighter screens, a new, more powerful chip that's enabling some of this stuff. But yeah, I think the double tapping gestures is like, you know, something really fresh.
And the AirPods?
AirPods. The only change coming to AirPods that we know of, well, actually two, is a USB-C charger. So now you can use the same USB-C to charge your phone as your AirPods. And Apple is also enabling the USB-C charging from iPhone to your AirPods. So if you get the iPhone 15, you can just run that cable over to your new AirPods and charge them that way. Yeah.
They still go in your ears.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't just about the gadgets. Tim Cook's acting skills were on display, which is getting a lot of attention.
Yes.
This skit promoting Apple's commitment to corporate social responsibility. Let's take a look at it.
I hope we didn't keep you waiting.
Mother Nature, welcome to Apple. How is the weather getting in?
The weather was however I wanted it to be.
All right, so we'll ask you to analyze his acting skills there. What's some of the reaction we're getting from that?
Yeah, there's been mixed reactions on social media regarding Tim Cook's acting chops. But, you know, Apple's doing away with the leather watch bands. And so, you know, if a new Apple Watch won't get you to buy you know, the device, maybe a skit with Octavia Spencer.
There you go. Exactly.
There you go. Big name to get in there for their little skit.
For those who are critical, maybe it was about the writing.
Yeah. Exactly. Let's go with that.
Dalvin Brown, thank you so much. Good to have you on.
Thank you. Let's stay on some money news. Another series of strikes could be looming as talks between the big automakers and the UAW drag on.
CNBC's Silvana Henao joins us with that and other financial headlines. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning. Yeah, so the United Auto Workers reportedly plan to carry out targeted strikes at certain plants if it doesn't reach contract deals with General Motors, Ford, and Chrysler parent Stellantis. Sources tell CNBC those plans could change based on how negotiations proceed right up until the deadline just before midnight Eastern on Friday. A targeted strike is a work stoppage only at specific locations versus a national strike where all union members walk off the job. Ford plans to double production of hybrid F-150 pickup trucks next year. The move speeds up the automaker's shift toward gas-electric engines as a hedge against truck buyers who may be hesitant to go all electric. Ford will offer the hybrid F-150 at the same price as a truck with a 6-cylinder gas-powered engine. If sales meet expectations, the hybrid F-150 could become one of the 3 best-selling gas-electric models, vying for the top spot held by Toyota's RAV4. And holiday sales are forecast to grow at the slowest pace in 5 years as worries about the economy and shrinking household savings push consumers to rein in spending. A report from Deloitte estimates sales will rise by 3.5% to 4.6%, and that compares to a more than 7% increase last year when high inflation drove up prices for everything from clothes and toys to home appliances, guys.
Right,
I don't want to think about holiday shopping, guys.
I know. I'm always last minute.
Oh, you mean you're not?
Yeah.
It's still summer. It's still summer.
I know. It does feel like it anyway. All right, Silvana, thank you.
Yeah.
Coming up, it was a night of fun, fashion, and a few throwbacks, too.
Up next, we'll have the most memorable moments of this year's MTV Video Music Awards. You are watching Morning News Now. Welcome back. Well, here's a reporter job that is straight out of a few people's wildest dreams. USA Today and the Tennessean are looking for a video-forward journalist to report exclusively on Taylor Swift. The gig pays up to $100,000 and will require international travel. That's fun. Unsurprising since Swift is touring the world. The ad posted by parent company Gannett reads, "Seeing both the facts and the fury, the Taylor Swift reporter We'll identify why the pop star's influence only expands, what her fan base stands for in pop culture, and the effect she has across the music and business worlds. I'm not applying because I'm very happy in my job. However,
can you do two jobs at once?
I know, right? I know, but like, yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it does speak to the influence that, you know, they need somebody to fully report.
Literally, it's a
cool
beat.
that you're probably going to be being sent to some of those shows and stuff.
No kidding. That's awesome.
And she cleaned up at the MTV VMAs, which you're about to get into.
Let's talk about that. There was the biggest names in music, including Taylor Swift, came together last night to celebrate the 40th. I can't believe this. The 40th MTV Video Music Awards. Taylor Swift swept the board, picking up 9 Moon Men trophies, and the members of NSYNC appeared together on stage for the first time in a decade. Brian Balthazar, entertainment journalist and pop culture expert, joins us now with all the highlights. Brian, good morning. I mean, let's talk about Taylor Swift. Huge night. What did she take home, and who were the other big winners of the night?
Oh, my gosh, 9 awards, like you said. Best video. What did she not take home, right? So we have best pop video. We have best video. We have best cinematography. She won an award for direction, her best artist, best album. So it was really a sweep for Taylor Swift, not really surprisingly. Best summer show. Again, she took every award very graciously and like the class act that she is, dazzling in Versace right there. So no surprise. Another winner last night, Nicki Minaj, who also hosted the event. She won for Super Freaky Girl Best Hip Hop. As you know, I don't know, she reshared our segment talking about Pink Friday 2 the last time we talked about Nicki Minaj. So a shout out to Nicki Minaj. And then Ice Spice, Ice Spice actually Best New Artist. Really an amazing win. You know, she's only been in the business about 2 years, and she's already collaborated with Taylor Swift and Nicki Minaj, and she's part of the blockbuster movie Barbie as part of this remix of Barbie Girl. So she's a big winner as well.
That's great to see. Let's talk about the other big headline, which was the NSYNC reunion. They actually presented Swift with her Best Pop Video Award. How did that moment go down? And any other viral moments from last night we should be talking about?
Right. Well, obviously, it was a big, huge moment. People went wild, Taylor Swift among them. And she kept saying, I think it was simultaneously the best and almost most disappointing moment because that was all we saw from them. And as you said earlier, we've only seen them on stage together about 10 years ago. So when Justin was receiving an award. So it was a brief moment. We were all kind of hoping that there was going to be a little bit more from them. But that was a big moment that started off the night. Then we also had the 50 years of hip hop. That was amazing. It was a who's who of hip hop artists: Lil Wayne, Grandmaster Flash, The Furious Five, LL Cool J, DMC. Another spectacular moment. That was like about hour 4 of the night. So that was a lot of people probably missed that if they weren't up. If they go to bed early, I should say. Demi Lovato had a great performance. She has a new album coming out in just 2 days where it's called Revamped, and it's rock takes on her most popular songs. And she really rocked it out last night. And also Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion performed Bongos, which is their new song. You know, they made a splash and controversy when they sang WAP together, performed WAP together. This was less controversial, but in about 3 days or 4 days, their video for this song has already gotten 10 million views on YouTube.
That's quite a few views.
Oh, Diddy winning the Icon Award, International Icon Award, performing with his son, presented by Mary J. Blige. 2 of his other children were backup dancers. He's got an album Off the Grid dropping in 2 days, so another big night for him as well.
Definitely a family affair there. The other big award, of course, is the MTV Video Vanguard Award. That went to Shakira this year. What should we know about that?
Yeah, so Shakira hasn't been on the VMA stage performing in 17 years, and she looks exactly the same, basically. Gave an incredible, iconic, appropriately 10-minute performance or so. She's the first South American artist to receive this honor, so it was an incredible performance and a much-deserved win for her.
And we have under a minute here, but we have to talk about the fashion. Who walked the pink carpet this year? What look stood out to you, Brian?
Yes, okay, let's take a look at Megan Thee Stallion. She's wearing a sheer Brandon Blackwood gown. That's beautiful. Let's look at Saweetie now. Okay, this is Area Couture. Let's take a look at sweetie. It's got some boning in it, literally a little bit of a Flintstones vibe. BB Rexa also is breaking new ground with the uncharted territory for skin exposure is the butt cheek. So she's got butt cheek cutouts in there. I don't know if we're going to show that, but if she turns around, there's a little bit of a, it looks like we're not going to show that. Selena Gomez looked gorgeous in Oscar de la Renta. And then look at that. I mean, I'm glad to see her in this beautiful dress because on Only Murders in the Building, she's always wearing like chunky sweaters and sweatshirts. She looked gorgeous here. And Billy Porter looked fantastic in white.
Billy always looks great, as do you. Brian Balthazar, thank you so much. Good to have you on this morning.
Thank you. You too.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now. Right now in Morning News Now, we are watching some catastrophic flooding as storms tear through the Northeast. Heavy rains decimating hundreds of houses across Massachusetts. The governor there now declaring a state of emergency. And the devastation is not over yet, with another round of drenching rain expected today. And it's all playing out as Hurricane Lee churns up the Atlantic. We are covering it all. Open inquiry in Washington this morning. There is a new impeachment probe in its early stages, this time into President Biden, announced yesterday by House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. We've got more on what exactly Republicans are trying to zero in on and how the rest of Congress is reacting. Cause for concern, a high-stakes meeting happening this morning in eastern Russia between Vladimir Putin and North Korea's Kim Jong-un. The possible weapons deal between the two nations that has the West up in arms. And too close for comfort? It's an iPhone feature that's been around for years, but now many Gen Zers, even millennials, are using the Find My app for a different reason, and it is definitely raising some eyebrows online. Good morning, I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for being here.
We begin this hour with the devastating damage left behind by severe storms that slammed the Northeast.
Yeah, this is what it looks like in Massachusetts, where a state of emergency has been declared. The slow-moving system dumped nearly 10 inches of rain in the state yesterday, leading to catastrophic flash flooding. And now they're keeping a close eye on Hurricane Lee as it makes its way up the East Coast. NBC News correspondent Kristen Dahlgren has the latest.
Well, hello from Leominster. Take a look behind me and you can see there is still water running into the streets today, and you get a sense of the destruction there as millions now brace for what's next.
This morning, a massive cleanup is underway across Leominster after catastrophic flash flooding devastated neighborhoods.
Within an hour, it was like a lake.
Washing away roads and railways, flooding parking lots and homes, and giving way to several giant, dangerous sinkholes, some swallowing cars.
I've never seen anything like this here.
The rushing water leaving trash and debris stuck in bridges and dragging dumpsters and cargo containers down rivers.
This trash is from people's houses, upstream.
Entire businesses destroyed.
Our store right now is caving in. This is our livelihoods.
The governor declaring a state of emergency.
We have seen way too many people with absolute, devastation right now.
The torrential downpours dumping nearly a foot of rain in just a matter of hours on Monday night. The devastating damage closing schools and forcing those in low-lying areas to seek shelter at higher ground as 2 dams had to be shored up before reaching their breaking points.
We're just kind of worried that the water might just rush down and flood us out.
And now more rain heading toward New England.
It's going to take a long time to get things back to normal in Leominster.
So a flood watch remains in effect here throughout the day. And of course, everybody here and up and down the coast now watching to see what Lee does. Back to you.
Kristen Dahlgren, thank you so much. Let's get the latest on Lee and where it's headed. Meteorologist Angie Lastman is back with an update. Hey, Angie, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. Let's start with what's going on in the Northeast because, of course, you just saw the images coming out of that region. And we've got more rain on the way. And, of course, we'll watch what happens with Lee down the line. But that's not until the weekend. In the meantime, we've got 29 million people under flood alerts. That's an improvement compared to where we started this morning when more than 40 million people were seeing these flood alerts. So we've seen some of those come down throughout the morning. I wouldn't be surprised if as we go on throughout the day, though, and that rain continues to work through, we maybe add a couple more of these back. Here's where the rain is right now. You can see the line of heavy rain working just to the east of New York, moving into portions, places like Hartford, under a flash flood warning at this hour as heavy rain works through just in time for that morning commute. You can see the cold front that has really kept us unsettled for the past couple of days. It's going to continue shifting off to the east. Eventually, we'll see some quieter conditions settling in when it comes to the rain chances for at least the short term. But in the meantime, for today, localized heavy amounts of rain with really impressive rainfall rates at times. So the flash flood risk is going to be there today. We've got saturated soils. We've got more rain on the way. So not unlikely for us to see that for places like Boston, Hartford, New York, stretching down into Atlantic City. So a heads up on that. It goes through to the afternoon hours today. So that afternoon commute and even into this evening, you could still be looking at potential for that flood concern. There's the rainfall totals that we'll expect. This just goes through tomorrow morning. And of course, I'm sure you've heard Hurricane Lee could bring us a little extra rainfall here for parts of New England. We're going to talk about that here in a moment. But here's an overview of what's going on in the Atlantic. It's busy, right? We're right around hurricane season's peak. So this is what we expect. We've got Invest 97L. That likely down the line will become Nigel. That would be our next named storm. But we've got a lot of time with that system. We've got Hurricane Margot. That's going to be a fish storm. Not worrying about that. And of course, there's Hurricane Lee maintaining its Category 3 strength. This tropical system that I mentioned, Invest 97L, right now it's just kind of an area of unsettled weather, some disturbed area, some showers, some thunderstorms. That'll likely form into this weekend. And as I mentioned, will become Nigel. We'll see exactly what it does down the line. But right now, we're not too worried about that. Instead, we're keeping a close eye on Hurricane Lee. As I mentioned, Category 3, 115-mile-per-hour winds. We are expecting the system to start to weaken today. It'll enter some cooler water. It's going to move just to the west of Bermuda as a Category 1 hurricane, but they've got tropical storm warnings up at this hour, and they'll start to see those tropical storm conditions as we get into tomorrow. Rain, some gusty winds. The east coast of the United States, even parts of the Caribbean, going to see that high surf and rip current threat that we've been talking about for days and days. But notice places like Maine are still in that cone down the line. So we could still see some direct impacts from this system as we get into Saturday and into Sunday. Heavy rain, of course, especially closer to the center, but the wind field's going to be impressive too. We've already got this system that we're expecting to expand, and that means tropical storm force winds could extend up to 500 miles in diameter from the center. So we could see some really gusty conditions, Joe, tropical storm condition, force winds kind of thing as we get into the next, Saturday, Sunday time frame in parts of New England, especially close to the coast, and potentially some storm surge.
That's incredible how wide this is.
It is
right?
really impressive. There aren't that many storms that have grown like that in our, since 2004. It's, I think, if I'm correct, only 4.
Wow. All right, Angie, thank you so much. This morning, there are new developments in the search for that escaped prisoner in Pennsylvania. 2 law enforcement sources with firsthand knowledge tell our Philadelphia affiliate, WCAU, that a backpack was found by police yesterday, but they are still determining if it is connected to the escapee. This as authorities say they have zeroed in on an area where they believe the convicted killer may be hiding. NBC News correspondent George Solis joined us from Pennsylvania with the latest. George, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. It's one of the many leads authorities are continuing to track down in this manhunt for Danilo Cavalcante. You mentioned that new perimeter. It's about 500 officers here scouring day and night, local, state, and federal agencies trying to do their best to find this fugitive who they consider now to be armed and dangerous.
This morning, police hopeful they are zeroing in on convicted killer Danilo Cavalcante. 2 law enforcement sources with firsthand knowledge telling NBC's WCAU backpack was found by police Tuesday evening, but are still determining if it is connected to the escapee. Officers stationed overnight in the search zone. Cavalcante has eluded police for 2 weeks and is now an even greater threat.
He is now armed with a .22 caliber rifle with a scope and flashlight mounted on it.
The 5-foot fugitive managed to steal the rifle and ammunition from a garage on Monday night, but he was caught by the homeowner, who drew his own gun and fired shots at Cavalcante. Police believe the escaped convict was unharmed as he fled the scene. Dr. Matt Bauer was visiting his parents who live in the area as the confrontation unfolded.
The adrenaline starts going and making sure everything's locked, making sure all the windows are secure.
Alerts being sent to residents.
Residents in the area are asked to continue to secure their homes and vehicles and remain vigilant.
This is a huge area. There's tons of woods, tons of trees, tons of places to hide, tons of barns and structures that are completely unoccupied. So it's scary because he could be anywhere.
Since Cavalcante escaped the Chester County prison, he has been spotted multiple times. This latest sighting, 20 miles north of the prison, expanding the search area once again. 500 law enforcement officials are now securing the updated 8 to 10 square mile perimeter in South Coventry Township. The entire community on edge, including local schools shutting down as a precaution.
Lieutenant Colonel, what has gone wrong here? I mean, have you underestimated him? Is he just that much of a worthy adversary?
Sir, I don't know why you would think something has gone wrong. Our law enforcement people have done an amazing job tracking him and locating him, that proverbial needle in the haystack, and they've located that needle repeatedly. And I believe we will be successful in the long run.
And Joe, so one of the big concerns here from authorities is that Cavalcante may try and steal another car to get not just out of this county, but potentially out of the state. They are urging the public now more than ever to remain vigilant by locking all those doors and windows and keeping car keys close. Joe?
All right, George, thank you so much. Under mounting pressure from his own party, House Speaker Kevin McCarthy is directing 3 House committees to open an impeachment inquiry into President Biden. As part of the probe, Republicans are seeking bank records and other documents from the president and his son, Hunter Biden. The White House denies any wrongdoing by the president and called the move, quote, extreme politics at its worst, saying GOP infighting is forcing Speaker McCarthy's hand.
This isn't based on anything substantive. It's based on the fact that he is being attacked from his right, and he's throwing them red meat.
For more, we're joined by NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles. Ryan, good morning. So, first of all, what do we know about the timeline for this inquiry and what's next for these House committees?
So at this point, Joe, there is no timeline. The committees that are going to be in charge of this investigation say that their next step is to subpoena the bank records of the Biden family associates. And they now believe that because they have the banner of an impeachment inquiry, that gives them additional subpoena power that they didn't previously have. They are normally under the constraints of a legislative purpose. Under an impeachment inquiry, because of the investigation being broadened out, that gives them more time to do so. The big question, though, Joe, is whether or not this ever comes to a vote on the House floor. The Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, said as late as last week that he wasn't going to take this step without a House floor vote. He has now made an about-face, and we'll have to see if more evidence comes out that would get him to the point that they would actually move on articles of impeachment.
Yeah, let's talk a little more about that, because it is a major reversal after McCarthy told the conservative website Breitbart he wouldn't open an impeachment inquiry without that full House vote. Do we know what's behind the change?
And, Joe, take it back even further. He was super critical of the then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi when she made a similar move in the initial impeachment of the then President Donald Trump. The biggest reason has to be that he just doesn't have the votes. There are 18 Republicans that currently represent districts that President Biden won. Those moderate Republicans may not want to take a formal vote that leads to an impeachment inquiry. And there's nothing that formally requires the Speaker to take that step in order to launch this investigation. Now, if it gets to the stage of formal articles of impeachment, which would then lead to a trial in the Senate, that would absolutely require House votes. It seems as though McCarthy feels that more evidence needs to be uncovered before they even get to that stage. And to be clear, Joe, there really is no solid evidence yet that specifically links any of the work of Hunter Biden to the President of the United States.
So it's not surprising that Democrats are lashing out against the impeachment inquiry, but you mentioned some moderate Republicans concerned about this. There's some apprehension there from some Republicans. Why is that?
Well, the biggest reason is that if they don't end up coming up with enough evidence, at least evidence that convinces the average American, then that could be a serious blowback for them in the 2024 election. Every member of the United States House of Representatives is up for re-election in a 2-year cycle, and they're going to be running at the same time of a presidential election. And if these are districts that President Biden won, it stands to reason that the voters there may not be as inclined to support an impeachment impeachment inquiry, especially when there isn't that smoking gun that Republicans claim exists. So it puts many of these House Republicans in a very difficult position. And we should also point out, Joe, it comes at a time when Congress has a long list of responsibilities that they need to take care of, including funding the government. The government funding runs out at the end of September, and we are still right now staring down the possibility of a government shutdown. An impeachment inquiry just makes that process even that much more complicated.
Yeah, the clock is ticking there. Ryan Nobles, we appreciate your reporting on this one. Thank you so much. Let's turn to international news now. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un met with Russian President Vladimir Putin early this morning. Both leaders held talks at a major Russian space center in the far east of the country. It's a summit that could have major consequences for the war in Ukraine. NBC News chief foreign correspondent Richard Engel joins us now from central Ukraine with more on this. Richard, good morning.
Good morning. This summit was a long time in the making. The last time that these two leaders met was 4 years ago. And Kim, in the far east of Russia, told his host, Vladimir Putin, that Russia has North Korea's unconditional support. And he expressed the highest confidence that Russia would secure, in his words, a heroic victory in the war here in Ukraine.
Stepping out of his limo in the far east of Russia, a slimmed-down Kim Jong-un greeted Vladimir Putin. Thank you for inviting us, even though you're busy, Kim said. The two leaders toured Russia's version of Cape Canaveral, the modern Vostochny Cosmodrome. Both men are under sanctions, but didn't seem isolated this morning. Instead, they're drawing closer because of the war in Ukraine. After signing the visitors' book, Kim and Putin were all smiles, praising each other and the historic ties between their countries dating back to the Korean War. Putin said he hoped the space station could help Kim, who he says is interested in advancing North Korea's space program. U.S. officials say North Korea's space program is really cover for its long-range ballistic missile program. Because if you can launch a satellite into space, you can also fire a nuclear warhead at the United States. North Korean intercontinental ballistic missiles can already reach anywhere in the U.S. As if to prove a point during the visit, North Korea launched ballistic missiles overnight into the sea off Japan. Kim also seemed to praise Putin's war in Ukraine without mentioning the country by name. Russia has risen to a sacred struggle to defend its sovereignty and protect its security in opposition to the hegemonic forces that oppose Russia, Kim said. At their dinner, Putin toasted to strengthening friendship and Kim's health. The deal between Putin and Kim is simple enough, according to U.S. officials. Putin is offering North Korea help with advanced technology and likely food in exchange for ammunition, the artillery and rockets that Putin needs to fend off the U.S.-backed counteroffensive in Ukraine. North Korea, one of the most militarized countries in the world, has huge stockpiles of artillery, which Ukrainian and American officials worry could tip the balance of the war to Russia.
Kim has wrapped up his meeting with Putin and is now heading back on his slow armored train to North Korea, but making some stops at other Russian military facilities along the way. Joe?
All right, Richard, thank you so much. Over in North Africa, two countries are dealing with the staggering devastation caused by two separate disasters, tragedies that have decimated towns and displaced thousands. In Libya, a minister says more than 5,000 people have died in unprecedented floods, while in Morocco, rescuers are continuing the desperate search for earthquake survivors. NBC News foreign correspondent Kelly Kobiea has the latest on both. Kelly, good morning.
Joe, good morning to you. One UN official calls the disaster in Libya a calamity of epic proportions. And the numbers are difficult to tally. At least 6,000 dead, according to the International Rescue Committee. With those numbers likely to change. Aid workers are struggling to reach the flood zone, with roads and, in places, entire neighborhoods washed into the sea.
This morning, utter devastation in eastern Libya and a desperate search for survivors, with 10,000 believed missing. A third of the city of Derna on the Mediterranean coast wiped out. Cars tossed like toys. Homes and families swept away. Bodies are lining the streets and being pulled from the sea. Storm Daniel pummeled the desert region Monday, dropping 9 months of rain in just 6 hours. The deluge causing 2 dams to burst, washing away neighborhoods. These satellite photos showing the region before and after the dams collapsed.
How bad is it on the ground?
This definitely ranks among the most destructive disasters. But what is really missing is some more support on the search and rescue operations, because the window of opportunity to finding survivors is closing down.
Aid is now pouring in from Turkey and other countries after the second major disaster in northern Africa in days. Rescuers in Morocco still hoping to find survivors in the rubble after that 6.8 magnitude quake that struck Friday. Thousands are homeless. We don't know where we're going to go, what we're going to do, where we're going to live. Winter is coming. We have young children. We have nothing, this woman says. Many in the remote mountains still waiting for aid as local communities come together to continue the search.
And that's happening in Libya as well. And aid is starting to reach some of the more remote areas in Morocco. But this morning, 30,000 people are displaced in Libya alone. The Biden administration has authorized emergency funding to aid organizations, the IRC and others appealing for donations, and also calling for search and rescue assistance, particularly in Libya, where the Libyans simply don't have the expertise or resources for that kind of search and rescue. Tens of thousands, Joe, in 2 North African countries now in need of help. Joe.
All right, Kelly, thank you so much. Coming up on Morning News Now, we're going to take you deeper inside former President Trump's legal troubles with an exclusive look inside the Fulton County, Georgia jail where he was processed, plus a one-on-one conversation with the sheriff in charge of that jail. What were his interactions with the former president like? And later, the fiance of that American caver who was trapped underground in a Turkish cave is speaking out about his ordeal. Our conversation with her after this. We're back now with the miracle in Turkey. An American caver is recovering this morning after being rescued more than 3,000 feet underground. This is the moment rescue crews pulled Mark Dickey up from the depths of a cave. He was helping to chart the cave system when he was struck with gastric pain. That pain eventually turned into bleeding and vomiting. He waited 9 days inside the cave as rescue crews charted a mission to bring him out. And joining us this morning is Mark Dickey's fiancée, Jessica Van Ord, to give us an update on Mark and a look inside the rescue efforts. Jessica, good morning. Good to have you with us. So glad this ended with a happy ending. First of all, how are you and Mark doing now that he's out of the cave?
We're great, so relieved, and Mark is in good spirits and heading towards good health.
You chose to stay with Mark in the cave when he first became sick, then you later came out and helped on land. I cannot imagine having to make that decision. What was going through your mind at the time, and how did you reach the conclusion that that was the best thing to do?
Sometimes you just know what needs to be done, and you have to do it. When Mark fell ill, I went out to get help because we needed it, and once the rescuers started coming, I went out because he had a doctor now, and the rescue teams had it under control.
What part were you most nervous about during this whole process?
Just at one point, Mark's health, but after that, I was very confident in the rescuers. So I don't know if nervous is the word. I tried to ward off any negative thoughts, only positive ones.
That's good to hear. The positive thoughts certainly helped here. How were you able to help with rescue efforts outside of the cave? And what was it like working with such a large rescue team that was there to help bring your fiancé to the surface?
So there's a lot of behind the scenes work. There's tons of communications going along, and everyone has to coordinate from so many different countries and create a plan. So I just kept up to date, kept talking to everyone, and most importantly, I helped a lot with the gear cache, actually. It's very heavy on the rescuers personally and on the rescue teams. We have to use hundreds of dollars of personal equipment that is totally trash afterwards, and that's a huge expense for someone from a a poorer country, and we have to make sure all the correct gear goes in the cave, and it has to come from so many different places. So I helped a lot with that.
Were you amazed by the response by the people who came from all over the world to help out with this?
Yes, it was amazing, and people donated so much time and love, honestly, to the rescue efforts, and their own personal funds. I really do hope that people keep donating to the GoFundMe organized by the National Cave Rescue Commission. We really hope to personally help rescuers recoup their costs for that.
After he was rescued, Mark said, "This is a first," and I understand you replied with, "Let's make it a last." That's my favorite quote in a long time. Do you think he's going to return to caving anytime soon?
Oh, of course. I mean, anything that can happen medically above ground can happen underground, and this is just bad luck. So Mark's not scared of caving. He's very enthusiastic about the underground world, and it's a beautiful thing to share with others. And also it can be a great resource. There's new species, new bacteria colonies, just tons of stuff going down there, and we want to see where the water goes.
Jessica Van Ord, we appreciate your positive attitude and appreciate you taking a few minutes to join us this morning. Glad Mark is doing well. Glad you're doing so well. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Well, now to an exclusive interview with the Fulton County Sheriff, who was responsible for booking former President Trump into the Fulton County Jail and processing his fingerprints and mugshot. He says Trump was serious but friendly.
Said I recognize you from TV, and me being from Southwest Atlanta, I couldn't help but say likewise.
NBC News correspondent Blaine Alexander joins us now from Fulton County with this exclusive interview. Hi, Blaine. Good morning. So can you start off just by describing the facility? I mean, there's been some criticism about the jail's condition. 10 inmates have actually died there this year. First, I'm just wondering what you saw. How was it?
Well, Savannah, good morning to you. And you're right. So during that exclusive access we actually got a chance to see the area where former President Trump was basically entered the jail, where he was booked in, where he had his fingerprints taken, his mugshot taken. No other news camera had seen that yet. You kind of see a little bit of it right there. Now, this is the place that's called intake. This is the only area that he was actually inside of the building. And we learned that he was only inside for about 8 minutes or so, just to kind of go in, take the mugshot, do his fingerprints, and then leave. So while we were there, certainly we saw a different situation than what the former president would have seen. When he came in, intake was shut down. There were no inmates. The sheriff tells me that there were only about 5 or 6 other individuals, including the sheriff himself and other guards and people who were there for the process, but certainly a very different environment. In fact, the sheriff called it sterile. Now, when I asked him, though, about those 10 deaths, of course, that's something that's gotten a lot of attention. And he talked about the fact that, yes, this is something that he's kind of been ringing the alarm bell about for a while, needing more resources to shore up the security there at the facility, and something that he's still working to get, quite frankly.
Blaine, tell us now, what did the sheriff have to say about his interactions with the former president? I said just a moment ago, serious but friendly. Expand on that for us.
It was very brief. He mentioned that he greeted him, he shook his hand, they exchanged some pleasantries, but he did talk about his demeanor. And I asked him if it seemed that the magnitude of the moment was setting in, both for the former president and for the sheriff himself, all of the people who were inside and witnessing this historic moment. Here's what he said.
I believe when you start signing the paperwork, when you realize what mugshots and fingerprints are, I think the magnitude weighs on you. And ultimately, it was one that really moved us in the space of understanding how huge this moment was.
And so certainly he talked about how that was a huge moment. And I did ask him about mugshots as well. And he did mention that that was something that was a very difficult decision for him to ultimately decide to take that mugshot.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about that just quickly. I mean, people are discussing this. What did he have to say more? Expand on this about the decision to not only just take it, but then publish the president's mugshot.
Yeah, it came down to him. He said that he was the one who made that decision. He said, of course, if you take the mugshot, it's going to become public because it's in public record. But he said it was a decision that was a difficult one for him. I asked him ultimately what was it that made him say, let's take a mugshot of the former president, given the fact that he is, of course, one of the most recognizable people in the world. There are plenty of identifiable photos of him out there. So why do this? Here's what he had to say.
We have 3,600 detainees. 85 to 90% look like you and I. and they don't have that choice. We don't give them that choice. And they are simply accused of a crime as well. I have a responsibility to our community to make sure that
across the board, and that ultimately drove his decision.
All right, Blaine Alexander, thank you so much.
We have breaking news this morning. Pennsylvania State Police announced that they have captured escaped inmate Danilo Cavalcante. We don't have any more information beyond that at this point, how he was captured, where he was captured. The manhunt was now in its 14th day. Yesterday's authorities said they believed that Cavalcante was armed with a .22 caliber rifle, that they were searching an area of about 8 to 10 square miles. Schools in the area had been closed. Residents have been on edge. A press conference announcing details of the capture is scheduled for 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. We will have continuing coverage throughout the morning, and we'll bring you that news conference when it happens here on NBC News Now. Coming up, almost as quickly as hopes here in New York were heightened over Aaron Rodgers' big-time trade to the Jets, they were dashed.
That's right. The superstar quarterback is now out for the season after that jaw-dropping injury Monday night. So what exactly happened? Could it be a career ender? We will huddle up on it all next. Welcome back. The New York Jets are officially without Aaron Rodgers for the rest of the season after the team confirmed the superstar quarterback suffered a torn Achilles tendon.
NBC News contributing correspondent Kaylee Hartung takes a look at what this means for the team and the four-time league MVP.
Hey there. The Jets wooed Aaron Rodgers away from Green Bay with sky-high hopes. We're talking Super Bowl dreams. But even with a win on Monday night, their season is now up in the air. And while no one should count Rodgers out, this is the kind of injury that could bring an end to an incredibly storied career.
Considered one of the greatest players to ever take the field, Aaron Rodgers, now sidelined for the rest of the season. The New York Jets confirming the quarterback tore his Achilles tendon in Monday night's game against the Bills.
He's out for the year. He needs surgery.
Rodgers now out after just 4 regular season snaps as a Jet. Fans of the franchise who haven't seen postseason play in more than a decade in disbelief.
It's a shame for the Jets.
Aaron Rodgers was going to take us to the promised land.
But from Sports Talk Radio.
Do not tell me today that the season is over. Do not tell me that. Because it's not.
To the Jets head coach.
I don't know why people are trying to put an obituary under our team name.
An attempt to keep hope alive.
There's 52 other guys in the locker room, plus the 16 practice squad guys that believe that we can do a hell of a lot of good things here.
The Jets signed Rodgers in a blockbuster deal that includes a guaranteed $75 million. After he spent 18 seasons in Green Bay, becoming a 4-time league MVP and leading the Packers to a Super Bowl win. Even as Rodgers had openly discussed hanging up his cleats.
I went in the darkness, 90% retiring, 10% playing. That's where my mind was.
But he took on New York with renewed energy, bringing a swagger to the Jets both on and off the field.
Sometimes it's a free guy right here. Get on it, then retreat.
You know, him making the move to New York and everybody watching him on Hard Knocks. You've gotten into his character and seeing what he's been and what he's brought to that team.
Now 39 years old, recovery from this kind of injury will be a challenge.
I think the biggest thing is that we all wonder now is what's next for him. Does he decide to come back and try to do, the impossible, which he's really done his whole career?
Though his NFL future is uncertain, his legacy is not.
If his career were to end and he decides to retire, he'll still be looked at as one of the greatest to play. This does not affect how he will be viewed.
Again, don't let it get lost in all of this. Despite Rodgers leaving the game, the Jets still managed to beat the Bills in dramatic fashion, in large part thanks to their defense. But it was Zach Wilson who took over the offense. Now, Jets head coach Robert Saleh says they will shop around to add another quarterback to the roster. But he says this is Zach's team, and we're rolling with Zach. Back to you.
All right, Kaylee Hartung, thanks so much. Time now for our weekly medical checkup. We're going to explain why being a night owl could have some negative effects on your health.
Well, lucky for us, that's not an option. Plus, we have tips on how to reduce your risk of depression, and some of them are as easy as taking a walk outside. NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel joins us now for these medical headlines. Hi, Dr. Patel. It's great to have you with us. So let's start with that sleep study showing night owls. People who stay up pretty late may have worse habits than those who get up early. Walk us through why that is and if there's anything that they can do to try to fix that or get on a different schedule.
Savannah, this gets to the heart of everything that I was hoping I would never have to see evidence of. But we see this now, very clear evidence in a study of over 60,000 middle-aged nurses for almost a decade, where they looked at all sorts of habits, behaviors, and outcomes. And what they saw is that if people had what they call kind of an earlier kind of sleep chronotype, meaning you're the kind of person that sleeps early and wakes up early compared to someone who really gets their energy going late at night like me and still tries to wake up early, that people like me are at a higher risk of getting diabetes. We have a higher risk of being obese. We have a higher risk of many of the diseases and even depression, some of the mental health disorders that we've been talking about, and overall more likely to smoke and get not enough sleep. We always try to aim for 7 to 9 hours, but people like me just don't get enough. So the doctor's orders here, the biggest words I could say are sleep, sleep, sleep. But how do you do it? Shift your sleep 15 minutes a day. You can't start to sleep 7 to 9 hours at 10 p.m. just like that if you're up until midnight anyway. So 15 minutes a day, and you can start to move that clock back. And then do everything you can to avoid caffeine. So anything that can keep you up at night, screens, all the things that I love to do, I'm going to have to put it to practice. Yes.
It's hard to hear. I was a night owl for the longest time because I reported for the 10 p.m., 11 p.m. news when I worked in local news, and then you're up to, and it was definitely an unhealthy lifestyle. You could tell it was. So, all right, let's talk about depression. We know it can be part genetic, but an all-around healthy lifestyle can significantly decrease the risk of being depressed. So let's talk about what that healthy lifestyle includes besides being an early bird.
Yeah, so they looked at over 13,000 people with depression and put them into categories based on genetic risk and a number of other factors. We've known that there have been some genetic risks of depression, but what we haven't understood and the researchers have taken into this consideration is how much can you cut that genetic risk of depression and even improve any of the depressive symptoms that you have. And what they found is that it's not just all the sleep habits that we're talking about, but it's everything from simple things like taking a walk every day, even having more kind of conversations and talking to people, meaningful relationships. So here we talk about cutting genetic risk, which is dramatic with just your lifestyle behaviors. And that alone can improve depression by up to 25 to 50%. So the doctor's orders here, make it a group effort. Try to have the people around you engaging in these healthy habits, whether it's diet or sleep or activity or just personal connection. And then if possible, make one change at a time. So I always tell patients, you're not just going to wake up all of a sudden, sleep better, eat better, and think about kind of who you can make meaningful connections with. Try one baby step at a time.
All right, there you go. That's something we can all at least move towards.
That's
a little tiny baby step. Finally, last study we want to talk about, finding that people might get the biggest mood boost from being social. But you know what gets in the way a lot of times of that is our phones, that we just sit on our screens looking at them instead of interacting with other people. Tell us about that. Dig into that for us and why it is that we rely on our phones to kind of fill free time.
Yeah, I love these kinds of natural experiments. They took people kind of and put them into 4 groups and basically took 2 of the groups and said, how much do you think you would like activities like sitting alone, kind of scrolling through different types of social media, videos, texting as well, and then having a conversation with a stranger. And all across the board, people predicted that they would enjoy having a conversation. And then when they actually had people do these things, they absolutely enjoyed it more than almost everything. The funny thing is that probably like all of us watching, we wanted to keep our phones with us. So having that conversation, the doctor's orders here is try to spark up a conversation with a stranger and then understand that you can limit your screen time, but that the screen time can be a meaningful way, even more important than feeling alone.
Dr. Kavita Patel, we always appreciate when you come by. Thank you so much.
Coming up, we have got some breaking economic data this morning.
After the break, the latest read on inflation, what it means for your bottom line. That's next on Morning News Now. Stick around. We are back with some breaking economic data.
Inflation climbed by more than expected in August to 3.7% on an annual rate. That's over the course of a year, and 0.6% month to month. Here to discuss this latest report, NBC News business and data reporter Brian Jong and Investopedia's editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Good morning to both of you. So, Brian, walk us through these numbers, how they compare with the previous month.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, not necessarily going in the right direction. Inflation, the rate of inflation going up to 3.7%. Again, California. That's an annual rate, so you're comparing August of this year compared to prices in August of last year. And the yearly rates that we had seen in June and July were also going in the opposite direction. So again, the rates of change getting a little bit faster here. If you're looking at a monthly rate, that's also going in the wrong direction, going up in terms of the monthly rate to 0.6%. Economists had expected about half of that. So it seems like prices are going up mostly because of gasoline and also airline fares going up. So those are interesting threads to watch in this report.
Yeah, Caleb, let's bring you in here, get your reaction on this and what Brian had just mentioned. Oil prices, how much of an impact is that? Headed in the right direction at all?
Not at all, because we've had those supply cuts by Russia and Saudi Arabia by about 1 million barrels a day extended through the rest of the year. The average price of a gallon of gas, $3.84. I'm out here in California. It's like $5.75. That is up from $3.70 last year on average. So gas prices push inflation up in general, especially food costs as well.
Those California gas prices are always just like, what? Huh? So, Brian, break it down. We talked about gas. We talked about airlines. What are the categories looking like as far as what we're seeing right now?
Yeah, and, airline fares, it kind of makes sense because if gasoline prices are going up, jet fuel costs are going up, so airline tickets are going up as well. But there are other categories that we're also watching very closely. The largest expenditure for most Americans is shelter, just a roof over your head. We're talking about rent payments. We're talking about mortgage payments. Those continue to weigh very heavily, although the rates of monthly change did slow a little bit between July and August. But again, it's still such a big expenditure, and we know that rents are really high. So that's a big contributor there as well. Food prices are also a big deal for Americans. Those prices continue to go up by 0.2% between July and August, fueled mostly by meat prices getting more expensive for everything chicken, beef, and also pork.
The other issue, of course, with mortgage, especially if you bought a house recently, the interest rates. Yes. Caleb, let's talk about that. What are we expecting at next week's Fed meeting? And when do you think we could realistically see the Fed start to cut interest rates rather than pause or hike, of course?
Yeah, that's coming up in 7 hours, 7 days, 5 hours, and about 20 minutes. And the Fed's probably going to hold rates right where they are. They're going to digest this. This is the last inflation report they'll see before they meet next week. But I was looking at the other report that also comes out on CPI Day. That's average hourly earnings, and they are down 0.5% when you look at that year over year. So that's one thing the Fed watches closely. It's watching overall inflation, but it's watching wage inflation, and wage inflation has been cooling. That's what the Fed wants to see. So this may just make it even more pretty certain that the Fed won't raise rates next week. When we look out to November, to the following meeting, there's about a 40% chance the Fed will raise a quarter point then. So we're maybe not quite done with rate hikes, and we're going to be around these high levels for a while. Higher for longer is the mantra from the Fed.
Caleb has that Fed meeting countdown clock actually injected into his head.
So. I need one, actually.
Or it's like, do your glasses have like a little screen where
Maybe
like you have the countdown
right.
constant?
Well, we have you here, Brian. Let's have you talk about the other story you're covering, which is the threat of a possible strike for UAW union in negotiations with the big automakers. Deadline's tomorrow night, right? Where are things at right now?
Yeah, we're talking about over 140,000 workers at GM, Ford, and Chrysler makers Stellantis, and they have to get to a deal essentially by 11:59 p.m. tomorrow, midnight into Friday, or else those 140,000+ workers are going to be striking, which means lower car inventory when it comes to new vehicles because the plants will be shut down. Really, what it sounds like right now, wages, wages, wages. The UAW wants a 46% increase in wages compounded over the next 4 years. The best offer that we're aware of comes from Stellantis, 14.5%. So those numerically show you just how wide the chasm is. Can they get a deal in the next day and a half? We'll have to see.
All right. Brian, Caleb, lots to cover this morning. We thank you both.
Thank you. Well, let's stay on financial headlines now and dig more into the fact that the new iPhone is finally out and maybe we'll have a taker. I highly doubt it.
Yeah, we'll see. Who knows? It's time to update the iPhone 7. CNBC's Savannah Hanau has more on that and other
This is the 15,
Savannah,
by the way.
Good morning.
Good morning, guys. Listen, I don't know if I'm going to upgrade yet. I need to be convinced a little bit more. All right, let's get you those headlines. Apple unveils 4 new iPhone models and 2 updated watches as it tries to lure consumers into upgrading their devices. The price for the iPhone 15 Pro Max starts at $1,199. That's about $100 more than a year ago. This reflects Apple's strategy to offset stagnant sales with higher average selling prices. The Pro and Pro Max models have faster chips, 3 cameras that can take spatial videos, and all 4 models have the USB-C charging port following demands from European regulators. Apple is still the world's most valuable company, but revenues have declined in the past 3 quarters. Amazon plans to invest more than $440 million over the next year to boost wages for its contract delivery workers. The company expects them to earn $20.50 an hour or more on average. Amazon uses outside contractors to make faster and more efficient deliveries. The program has nearly 280,000 driving jobs and helps Amazon deliver 20 million packages a day in 19 countries. And Dunkin' has a new celebrity collaboration. Ben Affleck and rapper Ice Spice appeared in a commercial during last night's MTV Video Music Awards, trying to come up with a name for Dunkin's new drink. So their creation, the Ice Spice Munchkins drink, it blends iced coffee with Pumpkin Munchkins donut holes, and it's topped with whipped cream and a caramel drizzle. Ice Spice's fans are known as Munchkins. The new drink is available for a limited time. Sounds rich and very heavy.
So the donuts are in the drink?
Apparently blended in there.
Okay.
I'm pretty sure she was wearing a diamond necklace last night that said Munchkins on it, which was kind of cool. Yeah.
I mean, I guess that says a lot. I don't know, but that drink,
sounds
I
like
don't
the
know.
perfect collaboration. All right.
There
Thanks,
you go.
Alana.
Thank you. Got it.
Coming up, it is an Apple feature that's now giving a whole new meaning to finding friends.
After the break, why many Gen Zers, even millennials, are tracking each other's locations on their phones, and if there are any security concerns that are coming to light. I'll bring that story next.
It always feels so good to get back to it. Hitting high gear a little earlier because there's more to cheer for. It's back to school, back to business, back to the feeling that anything is possible.
Take back the day, make it all right.
It always feels so good to get back to it. Hitting high gear a little earlier because there's more to cheer for. It's back to school, back to business, back to the feeling that anything is possible.
Take back the day, make it all right.
Welcome back. A 3-year hunt for a stolen Vincent van Gogh painting ended with the artwork being returned in an IKEA bag. The painting, The Spring Garden, was stolen from a museum near Amsterdam in March of 2020 during the COVID lockdown. Now a Dutch art detective, dubbed the Indiana Jones of the art world, got it back. It was handed to him in the bag, protected by a pillow, by a man who has not been named. The museum that owns the picture says it has been damaged, but is in good condition and can go back on display. A man in France had been convicted of the theft, but the painting had remained missing, thought to have been passed from one group to another until now. And who knew there was a real Indiana Jones out there right now finding artwork and bringing it back in an IKEA bag.
Those bags are quite large.
They are. You could put a big painting in those. All right. Let's end this hour with a new trend that is bringing people together while also raising some safety concerns, using your phone to keep track of your friends.
That is right. Get this number. Nearly 70% of Gen Z and 77% of millennials are tracking each other's location, according to a recent poll. We sat down with one group of friends to hear why they are so obsessed with keeping tabs on one another.
At your location.
The idea of friends constantly knowing where you are might sound too close for comfort.
Ooh, Emma's at the gym. Ooh, Stacy's at work. Ooh, Mia's at her ex's.
But many Gen Z and millennials say for them, it sounds like friendship. Apple added the Find My feature to all phones over a decade ago as a way for people to track lost devices. But now, young people use the app to monitor others' devices and de facto location, often posting about the trend on social media, using it for everything from making sure friends and family get to where they're going safely to browsing people's locations out of curiosity. Apps like Find My Friends have surged. Last year, 62% of all adults used location services, compared to just 7% a decade ago.
Find My is an application that comes with the iPhone, and you have to opt in to Find My Friends, to sharing your location with other people. When you go into the app, you'll see who you share with and who shares with you. And I can see our interview subjects are approaching.
Maya, Caroline, and Jaya all work together.
You're all in to Find My Friends.
Yes. Very much so.
And they all have each other's location, along with quite a few other friends.
How many people do you have on Find My Friends?
I have 14.
I have around 20.
I had 35.
Wow. You reach a point in a friendship where you're at Find My Friends level?
Yes. One of the main reasons is safety.
It starts as a safety measure where you're sharing your location with your friends so they can know where you are. But then as they have your location, it's turning into more of a form of social media where people are checking it constantly.
Checking and keeping friends on time.
And I get the text that's like, I can see that you're still at your house. Please hurry up. I can see that you're still getting ready. You said you left 10 minutes ago.
Like usually from me.
But it can lead to an awkward chat if you no longer want someone knowing exactly where you are.
Have you all been asked, why'd you stop sharing your location with me?
I have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It becomes personal.
Yeah.
I guess apart from parents, there's no need to know where you are all the time. That's just something that we've kind of invented, I think.
So can this go too far? Has it gone too far?
I think it definitely can go too far. One of my friends could be obsessively checking my location 24/7 and I would have absolutely no idea, which is a little bit creepy.
I had never thought of it as intrusive or invasive until we started talking about it. And I was thinking, you know, it is a little abnormal. We're the first generation to actually be the people who people know where they are at all hours.
That's not a concept everyone is comfortable with, especially for people who didn't grow up with cell phones in hand.
Everybody's has to know everyone's business all the time, and I think that's completely different than when I grew up.
Having someone know where I am 24/7 would be very, very strange, I think.
But for these young women, it's part of every minute of everyday life, even including the time spent in our interview.
You just got your phones back. Anyone you noticed that you all were here together?
Yeah, one person.
What did they say?
She had all of our locations and was like, what are you guys all doing together at 30 Rock?
At 30 Rock, there you have it. Well, of course, the question is also safety. If you're a parent and you know that your child is using these things, make sure that as they've opted into it with their friends, they actually know who those people are. Yesterday, Apple announced a new feature, actually, that's going to let you track your friends with even more accuracy. The iPhone 15 will have a new and more sensitive tracking chip. The new Find My is going to give you specific directions and distance when trying to link up with friends in the crowd, things like 30 feet to the right. Let's say you're at a concert venue. Well, privacy is something to keep in mind, of course, as well. Our devices and apps know a lot about us. Sometimes that data can be shared or sold to third parties, all things to consider when enabling location services or allowing your child to do so.
How many do you have in yours?
I've got 17 people.
Got it.
Friends that started on an international trip, and then you kind of keep it, and then it's been, you know, it's interesting. I get the hype.
Got it. All
You've
right.
got
0. Let's get to it for this hour. Morning News Now.
The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.